My family laughed when my sister called me a broke trash worker at her engagement dinner. And what cut deepest wasn't the insult itself. It was how easily it slid into the room, like it belonged there. No one corrected her. No one even flinched. Not my parents. Not my brother. They all nodded, sipped their drinks, and moved on. What none of them realized was that they were mocking me inside a place I had built piece by piece with my own hands. And before that night ended, every smile at that table would feel far less secure than it did in that moment. Before I tell you how it unfolded, take a second to support stories like this. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. It helps voices like mine reach the people who need them most. My name is Maribel Rowan, and the message arrived just after 3 in the afternoon while I was standing in the Verdant Lab kitchen, testing a new herb infusion. The burner hummed softly beneath the pot, rosemary and citrus lifting into the air. My phone buzzed against the stainless steel counter, the vibration sharp enough to pull me out of focus. Helena Rowan. My mother rarely texted anymore. When she did, it was never for conversation. It was for logistics. Celeste's engagement dinner. Thursday, 7 p.m. Verdant Hall. That was it. No hello. No warmth. And no mention. Of course, that Verdant Hall belonged to me. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, letting the irony settle in slowly. Out of every restaurant in Ravencroft City, my family had chosen my flagship space. The one I had poured years into. The one that represented everything they once told me didn't count. They didn't know, or maybe they never cared enough to ask. This was the same family that had shaken their heads when I turned down a corporate job offer years ago. The same voices that told me sanitation work wasn't ambition, that no one respected businesses built around cleaning, systems, or maintenance. Real success, my father had said once, comes with suits and offices. I wiped my hands on a towel and folded it neatly, staring at the message again. A part of me wanted to decline, to protect my peace, to avoid another evening of being politely erased. But another part, the one that had learned survival long before validation, answered for me. I'll be there. Thursday came faster than I expected. Ravencroft City was warm for the season, the air clinging just enough to make everything feel heavier. I arrived 10 minutes early, stepping out of the car onto the sidewalk in the Old Harbor District. I wore a slate blue wrap dress, tailored but quiet, hair pinned back, shoes practical enough to walk in, elegant enough to blend. Verdant Hall glowed ahead of me, its exterior a balance of reclaimed wood, warm lighting, and clean lines. I paused before entering, breathing in slowly. I hadn't walked through the front doors as a guest in months. Usually I came through the back. Quiet entrances, quiet exits. Ownership didn't require ceremony. Inside, the dining room moved with calm precision. Soft music, even lighting. Conversations carried without echo. Caleb Moore stood near the host stand reviewing the reservation list. When he saw me, his expression shifted just slightly. Recognition, respect, restraint. Evening, I said. He nodded once. No announcement. No fuss. Exactly as requested. As I waited, my phone vibrated again. A notification from social media. Celeste's story. A filtered image of a dumpster with a glittering crown pasted on top. Caption, Glow Up Season Crown. My name wasn't tagged. It didn't need to be. A young server approached, clearly new. Nervous smile, eyes darting. Ma'am, would you mind helping with a spill near table 6? I blinked, then smiled gently. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. His face flushed as Caleb stepped in smoothly. She's with the Rowan party. The server apologized and hurried away. I let it go. Tonight wasn't about correcting assumptions. It was about watching them play out. My family was already seated at the center table beneath the reclaimed wood chandelier I'd sourced from a barn auction years ago. Helena sat perfectly upright in pale silk, lips pressed thin. Gerard scrolled through his phone, detached as ever. Noah leaned back in his chair, half present. And Celeste, radiant, practiced, glowing, sat with Julian Crossfield's arm looped confidently through hers. Julian looked exactly like his resume suggested. Crisp suit, controlled smile, the kind of man who spoke in polished phrases and mistook them for depth. Helena brushed my cheek with a cool air kiss. Maribel, you're early. On time, I replied softly. Celeste didn't stand. She tilted her head, eyes scanning my dress. You look comfortable. Julian extended a firm handshake. Nice to finally meet you. We had met before, at a sustainability panel 2 years ago. He hadn't remembered then either. Conversation rolled forward without me. Wedding logistics, guest lists, optics. I sipped quietly, occasionally acknowledged, mostly ignored. When I mentioned a municipal partnership program, Helena smiled thinly. That sounds pleasant. Plates arrived with flawless timing. I noticed everything. Temperature, garnish, the way the light softened faces without glare. My family noticed none of it. Halfway through the first course, Helena turned to me. That dress is very practical, she said. Just like your work, I imagine. It serves its purpose, I answered. Gerard raised his glass. To Julian, he announced proudly. The man who's elevating this family. Glasses clinked. No one looked at me. Something shifted, not sharp, not loud. Just steady. Celeste laughed when a cousin asked what I did. She's into eco-trash stuff, she said lightly. Some recycling thing. Julian chuckled. Hey, at least someone's saving the planet. I smiled. Silence, when chosen, carries weight. I excused myself, walking past the kitchen window where my team moved with quiet focus. Steam rose. Knives flashed. Familiar. Grounding. In the restroom mirror, I straightened my shoulders. Founder. Owner. Builder. When I returned, dessert menus were being placed. The air felt different now. Thinner. Expectant. And then, from a nearby table, a woman's voice cut through the room. Clear, curious, unplanned. Excuse me, she said. Why is the owner dining with guests tonight? Every sound stopped. Caleb answered smoothly. Ms. Rowan requested discretion this evening. Heads turned. Slowly. Celeste's smile froze. And for the first time that night, the room began to pay attention. The silence that followed Caleb's words didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, stretching between breaths, tightening around the table like an invisible wire. Forks hovered midair. A glass clinked somewhere across the room and sounded far too loud. Celeste's smile didn't disappear. It stiffened. Her shoulders straightened as if posture alone could restore control. Helena blinked once, then twice, eyes narrowing slightly, not in curiosity but resistance. Gerard finally looked up from his phone, confusion flickering across his face like a delayed reaction. What owner? He asked quietly, more annoyed than alarmed. Caleb didn't answer again. He didn't need to. He had already said enough. The woman who had asked the question, mid-50s, poised, deep green silk blouse, nodded once as if satisfied, then returned to her seat without another word. The damage lingered behind her. Celeste leaned toward Helena, whispering urgently. I didn't need to hear the words to recognize the tone. The kind that tries to regain footing after misjudging the ground. Julian cleared his throat, lifting his glass with a forced chuckle. Well, he said, voice just a shade too bright. This place certainly feels intentional. That's one word for it, I replied calmly. He glanced at me, surprise flickering behind his eyes. It was the first time all evening he had actually looked at me instead of through me. Conversation resumed, but it had changed shape. It moved slower now. Each topic approached carefully, like stepping onto ice after hearing the crack. Helena adjusted her bracelet repeatedly. Gerard stared at his plate as if answers might be hiding beneath the glaze. Noah shifted in his chair, suddenly alert. Dessert menus arrived. Tara Blake, our lead server, placed one in front of me first without hesitation. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Helena noticed. Why did she? Helena began, then stopped herself. Tara smiled politely. Can I answer any questions about the menu? No, Celeste said quickly, waving her hand. We're fine. Her voice carried a sharp edge now, impatience creeping in where confidence had lived earlier. She scanned the dessert options, then scoffed lightly. Fermented honey mousse? That sounds experimental. It's the most requested item, I said evenly, especially from guests who value balance. Julian tilted his head. You seem very familiar with the menu. I met his gaze. I should be. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition? Doubt. He didn't press further, but the seed had been planted. Helena lifted her water glass, then set it down untouched. Maribel, she said carefully, what exactly did Caleb mean just now? I didn't rush to answer. I let the question sit, letting the weight of it press outward. He meant what he said. Gerard frowned. That doesn't clarify anything. No, I agreed. It doesn't. Celeste laughed suddenly, a brittle sound. This is ridiculous. We're here to celebrate, not play games. I'm not playing, I said. Julian leaned back, studying me now. Really studying me. You mentioned earlier you work in systems. Urban renewal infrastructure, I corrected gently. Helena waved her hand. Please, let's not make this more than it is. I smiled, small and controlled. That's been the family motto for years. A pause followed. Not awkward, charged. At the neighboring table, voices lowered. Eyes flicked toward us and then away again. The room had begun to sense a shift, even if it didn't yet understand it. Julian leaned closer to Celeste. Have you ever mentioned your sister's involvement here? Celeste's jaw tightened. She's exaggerating. I tilted my head. Am I? Tara returned with the desserts. She set mine down last this time, but only because Vivian Cole had just entered the room. She didn't need an announcement. She never did. Vivian moved through Verdant Hall like she belonged to it, which in many ways she did. Navy wrap coat, silk scarf, posture effortless. Conversations dimmed slightly as she passed. She stopped beside our table and placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. I heard you were dining tonight, she said warmly. I wanted to say hello. Helena stiffened. Gerard blinked. Julian sat up straighter. And you are? Helena asked too sharply. Vivian smiled. Vivian Cole. Strategic partner. Her gaze shifted to me. You've outdone yourself again. Celeste stared. Again. Vivian glanced around the room appreciatively. This space is remarkable. Purposeful without being sterile. It's rare. Julian swallowed. You're with the company? I helped scale it, Vivian replied smoothly. Because I believe in founders who build from substance, not image. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Gerard cleared his throat. Founder. I met his eyes. Yes. Helena's lips parted, then closed. You never said. You never asked, I replied calmly. Julian's face had gone pale, though he tried to mask it with a smile. Wait, he said slowly, eyes narrowing. Pure Cycle Collective? I nodded once. I pitched to them, he muttered. 2 years ago. You did, I said. I remember. His breath caught. You declined. I did. Celeste's chair scraped softly against the floor as she shifted. This isn't funny. No, I agreed again. It isn't. Vivian squeezed my shoulder gently. I'll let you finish your evening, she said, then turned to the table. You should be very proud. She walked away, leaving behind a silence thick enough to choke on. The wall-mounted screen above the dessert station flickered to life. A guest at the bar had connected their device, unaware of the timing. My face appeared on the screen, calm, composed mid-sentence. The Global Impact Forum talk. My voice filled the room, steady and unhurried, talking about invisible labor, about dignity, about hands that build what others stand on. A soft clap sounded from across the room, then another. Julian stared at the screen. Celeste's face flushed crimson. Helena's hands folded tightly in her lap. "No," Celeste whispered. "Turn that off." No one did. When the video ended, the applause wasn't loud. It was real. I stood slowly. "I didn't come here to expose anything," I said quietly. "I came because you invited me. I stayed silent because I always have. But silence doesn't mean absence." I looked at Celeste. "You called me disposable." At Helena, "You treated me like inconvenience." At Gerard, "You looked through me." "And yet," I continued, voice steady, "you've been dining inside my work all night." No one spoke. I picked up my purse. "Enjoy dessert." As I walked away, Tara caught my eye and nodded once. Behind me, no one followed, and that told me everything. I didn't rush out of Verdon Hall. I didn't storm. I didn't look back for a reaction. I walked at the same pace I always did when I finished a long day, measured, deliberate, already thinking about what came next. The room behind me buzzed with confused energy, a low hum of voices trying to reassemble a narrative that had collapsed without warning. Outside, the night air felt cooler than it had an hour earlier. Or maybe my skin had finally stopped burning. I crossed the patio slowly, past diners who pretended not to stare but watched anyway. I caught fragments of conversation drifting behind me. "Did you hear? That was her." I thought she was just. I didn't need to hear the rest. I sat on the stone bench beneath the olive tree near the edge of the patio. This spot had been intentional. Quiet, but close enough to feel the pulse of the place. I had chosen it during the second renovation, imagining future guests needing a moment of stillness. I hadn't imagined needing it myself. My phone buzzed. A notification from the local business forum. Someone had uploaded a clip of the Global Impact Forum talk. The caption read, "The woman behind Verdon Hall." I locked the screen without opening it. Inside, plates clinked. Chairs shifted. A laugh rose too sharply, then died. The dinner was trying to continue, but the spell had broken. Once you see the scaffolding behind a performance, it's hard to pretend the set is solid. I stayed on the bench until my breathing steadied. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to be precise about what I felt. There was no rush of triumph, no swelling satisfaction. What lingered instead was clarity, a quiet understanding that something irreversible had happened, not because I'd spoken, but because I'd stopped shrinking. When I returned inside, the dining room felt altered, as if someone had adjusted the lighting by half a degree. My table was still occupied, but the energy had drained from it. Celeste sat rigid, her engagement ring catching the light with every small movement of her hand. Julian stared at his dessert without touching it. Helena's posture remained elegant, but her eyes flicked constantly, assessing, recalculating. Gerard looked smaller somehow, shoulders curved inward as if gravity had finally found him. No one spoke when I approached. I took my seat. The silence stretched. Finally, Gerard cleared his throat. "You could have told us." I met his gaze calmly. "You could have asked." Helena's lips pressed into a thin line. "We didn't know." "That's not the same thing as not seeing," I replied. Julian shifted. "I need to understand something," he said carefully. "This company, Pure Cycle Collective, it's yours." "Yes." "And Verdon Hall?" "Yes." Celeste laughed suddenly, sharp and hollow. "This is insane. You're acting like we humiliated you on purpose." I turned to her. "You did." She opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. Helena leaned forward slightly. "Maribel, this isn't the place." I smiled faintly. "It is exactly the place." Tara returned to clear plates, her movements slower now, more deliberate. She avoided my family's eyes entirely. When she reached me, she paused just long enough to whisper, "We're proud of you." It was the first time anyone had said it aloud that night. Julian rubbed his jaw. "This changes things." "Yes," I agreed. "It does." Celeste pushed back her chair abruptly. "I need air." She stood, clutching her bag, and walked toward the exit without looking at anyone. Julian hesitated, then followed. Helena watched them go, expression unreadable. Gerard stared at the tablecloth. When the doors closed behind them, Helena finally spoke. "You embarrassed us." I tilted my head. "You embarrassed yourselves." Her eyes flashed. "We raised you." "And I built this," I replied evenly. The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Helena's gaze dropped, just for a moment. Then she straightened. "We should leave." Gerard nodded mutely. They stood, collected their coats, and walked past me without another word. Helena paused briefly, as if considering something, then continued on. I was alone again, but this time the loneliness felt different. Lighter. I stayed after they left, watching the dining room return to itself. The staff moved with quiet efficiency, resetting tables, offering apologies to nearby guests for the unexpected interruption. No one complained. If anything, the atmosphere felt more alive than before, like the room had taken a deep breath. Caleb approached. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yes." He hesitated. "The investors at table 12 asked if they could speak with you later." I smiled. "Tomorrow." He nodded, understanding. I left through the back that night, as I usually did. The alley smelled faintly of citrus and warm stone. I drove home with the windows down, letting the city pass by in a blur of streetlights and reflections. My phone remained silent. No message from Helena. No call from Gerard. No apology from Celeste. The next morning, the silence was louder. I sat at my kitchen counter, coffee cooling untouched. The clip from the night before had spread. Someone had stitched the dinner audio with my Global Impact Forum talk. The comments were relentless, supportive, furious, curious. She built the place they mocked her in. This is what quiet power looks like. They didn't even know who they were sitting with. I didn't respond to any of it. Around noon, a friend forwarded me a link. Julian Crossfield's firm had quietly withdrawn from a sustainability partnership. No statement, just a change in direction. The timing was obvious. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Julian, I never meant to disrespect you." I read it once. Then again. I didn't reply. Misunderstandings don't come dressed as laughter. By evening, Celeste had unfollowed me everywhere. I noticed, then closed the app. Helena called at 4:37 p.m. I let it ring twice before answering. "You made your point," she said, voice tight. "You didn't need to destroy everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. I stopped pretending. A pause. "You could have handled it privately." "I tried," I said. "For years." The line went dead. 2 days later, Vivian emailed. Pure Cycle Collective was being featured in an international sustainability report. Verdon Hall was cited as a model for integrated systems. My name appeared in print, attached to words like visionary and architect. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I went to the Verdant Lab and walked the floor. I checked in with Rena Alvarez, who was training a new hire. I reviewed plans for the next expansion. I listened. The world hadn't changed overnight, but my place in it had. That afternoon, Noah showed up at my office. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. He nodded, swallowing. "I should have." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he stood. "I won't make that mistake again." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. As he left, I realized something else had shifted. Not just how my family saw me, but how they no longer controlled the story I told myself. That night, I stood alone in Verdon Hall after closing. The lights dimmed. Chairs stacked. The room quiet. I ran my hand along the edge of the central table, the one my family had occupied like royalty. I didn't feel anger. I felt finished. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to be closed with intention. And behind me, the future was already moving. The morning after Noah left my office, I woke before the alarm. The city outside my window was still quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before people remember who they're supposed to be for the day. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing, waiting for the familiar tightness to creep in. It didn't. Instead, there was space. Unsettling at first, then grounding. I dressed without thinking much about it. Black trousers, soft linen blouse, blazer folded over my arm. Nothing symbolic, nothing defiant, just what the day required. When I arrived at Pure Cycle Central, the lobby felt calmer than usual. Not because less was happening, but because everyone inside it knew what they were doing. A few heads turned when I walked in, not in surprise, in recognition. "Morning, Maribel," someone called out. "Morning," I replied, nodding back. The elevator ride up felt shorter than usual. My calendar was full, but not frantic. Media inquiries, partnership calls, site visits. No emergency meetings. No damage control. Just momentum. The first request came from a regional planning council asking if I'd speak on a panel about integrated infrastructure. The second was from a university wanting to adapt our training program. By 10, my assistant quietly informed me that 2 board members wanted to move up the timeline on our next expansion vote. None of this felt like validation. It felt like alignment. Around noon, Helena's name appeared in my inbox. No subject line, just a message. "We need to talk, not as a family, as adults." I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I knew exactly what responding would invite. I didn't reply. Instead, I went down to the verdant lab. The greenhouse smelled like basil and damp earth. Sunlight filtered through the glass panels overhead, catching on rows of mint, oregano, and thyme. Rena Alvarez stood at the prep table with 2 trainees, explaining measurements with calm authority. She looked up when she saw me. "You good?" I nodded. "You?" She smiled. "Better than yesterday." That mattered more than anything else Helena could have said. By mid-afternoon, the story had spread further than I expected. A short clip from the dinner. Someone's phone recording the moment the question about ownership was asked, circulated online. No faces were named. No commentary added. Just the sound of a room going still. People filled in the rest on their own. Messages came in from women I didn't know. From operators. From cleaners. From managers who'd built systems inside companies that never learned their names. They didn't congratulate me. They thanked me. That evening, I attended a quiet planning session with Vivian. We sat across from each other in a small conference room, coffee untouched. "You didn't anticipate how fast this would move," she said. "No," I admitted. "I didn't plan for any of it." Vivian nodded. "That's why it worked." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were projections for the next 2 years. Numbers. Locations. Opportunities. "You're being invited into rooms that don't clap," she said. "That's where the real leverage is." I closed the folder. "I'm not interested in leverage." She smiled slightly. "That's why you'll have it." 2 days later, Celeste's wedding planner called Pure Cycle Central. She asked for me by name. I took the call. "I'm just confirming whether Verdant Hall will still be available for the engagement celebration next month," the planner said carefully. "Yes," I replied. "The space is open." A pause. "There's been some concern about optics." I let the silence stretch. "We don't curate comfort," I said finally. "We host events." "I understand," she said quickly. The call ended. That evening, Helena called again. I didn't answer. Gerard sent a message the following morning. Short, uncharacteristically direct. I didn't know how to stand up for you. I should have. I read it once. Then again. I didn't reply. Acknowledgement doesn't erase years of absence. It only names them. By the end of the week, Julian's firm had quietly dissolved its engagement with Celeste's wedding sponsorship package. No explanation given. Just a polite withdrawal. Celeste posted nothing. No updates. No ring shots. Silence where there had once been constant display. I noticed, then went back to work. On Friday afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at an international forum, not to tell my story, to discuss systems, logistics, long-term impact. I accepted. That night, I walked Verdon Hall after closing. The dining room was dark except for the low glow of exit lights. Chairs were stacked, tables bare. The room breathed differently when empty. I sat at the center table, the one my family had occupied, and let myself remember how small I'd felt there. Not because they had power, but because I'd handed it over by waiting to be seen. That door was closed now. The next morning, Helena showed up at Pure Cycle Central. No call. No warning. She stood in the lobby like she'd stepped into someone else's life by mistake. Her posture was perfect. Her expression composed. But her eyes moved too quickly, taking in the space, the people, the energy. She didn't belong here. And she knew it. When my assistant told me she was downstairs, I didn't hesitate. I went down myself. "Maribel," she said, relief and tension colliding in her voice. "We need to talk." I gestured toward a quiet seating area. "We can talk here." She hesitated, then sat. "I didn't raise you to humiliate us," she began. I met her gaze steadily. "You raised me to survive." Her jaw tightened. "That's not what I meant." "It's what happened," I said. She folded her hands together. "People are asking questions." "They should," I replied. She inhaled slowly. "Celeste is struggling." I didn't respond. Helena's voice softened. "You didn't have to do it like that." "I didn't do anything," I said. I stopped hiding. She looked around again, as if the walls themselves contradicted her memory of me. "You could have told us." I leaned back. "You could have listened." The silence stretched. Finally she stood. "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "I had to." She waited for something else. An apology. A concession. When none came, she nodded stiffly and walked away. I watched her leave without following. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, city lights spilling through the windows. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd tried to make palatable. Quieter, smaller, easier to ignore. None of them had worked. The following week, Pure Cycle Collective signed a partnership with the city council. Press cameras lined the sidewalk outside Pure Cycle Central. I spoke briefly about infrastructure, about sustainability, about dignity in work. I didn't mention my family. After the cameras left, Rena handed me a folded piece of paper. "Someone dropped this off," she said. Inside was a handwritten note. "We saw you before they did." I folded it carefully and slipped it into my bag. That evening, Celeste finally called. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "What do you want?" she asked, voice tight. "To hear your voice," I replied calmly. She laughed bitterly. "You ruined everything." "No," I said. "I revealed it." "You enjoyed it," she accused. "I endured it," I corrected. Silence. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think you mattered that much." I closed my eyes. "That was never up to you." The line went dead. I didn't feel relief. Or sorrow. Just finality. The next morning, I stood in the greenhouse at Verdant Lab as sunlight filtered through the glass. The herbs were thriving. The system worked. Below, the kitchen staff prepped for service. Laughter drifted up. Someone sang off-key. I ran my fingers along a row of basil and smiled. Some people wait their whole lives to be invited to the table. Others build it. And once you do, you decide who sits where. The silence that followed Celeste's call didn't feel empty. It felt deliberate, like a door that had closed itself without slamming. I didn't replay the conversation. I didn't dissect her words or imagine better responses. I'd spent too many years doing that, editing myself in private for people who never noticed the effort. This time, I let the silence stay exactly as it was. The next few days unfolded with a strange steadiness. Not calm, not chaos, just movement. The kind that happens when momentum finally outweighs resistance. At Pure Cycle Central, the team moved with purpose. Meetings started on time. Decisions landed without hesitation. People spoke freely, not checking the room for permission. I noticed it most in the small moments. A junior analyst confidently correcting a senior partner. Rena stepping into a planning discussion without being asked. Caleb sending me a revised floor plan without apology. None of it was loud. None of it needed to be. The world outside was louder. Articles continued to circulate, though my name was rarely mentioned outright. Instead, phrases appeared again and again. Invisible labor. Quiet leadership. The systems behind the shine. I didn't give interviews. I didn't clarify rumors. The truth didn't need polishing. One afternoon, while reviewing expansion logistics, my assistant hesitated at my door. "There's a delivery for you." In her hands was a large envelope. No return address. Inside, a glossy wedding invitation. Celeste and Julian. Venue, TBD. Reception, Verdon Hall. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not at the names. Not at the date. At the assumption. I set the invitation down and continued reading my reports. Later that evening, Helena sent another message. "We need to discuss the venue situation." I didn't respond. The following morning, Julian emailed. Polite, professional, measured. He spoke of misunderstandings, of stress, of optics, of how families sometimes struggle to navigate transitions. He asked if we could talk. I archived the email. Misjudgment wears many disguises. Courtesy doesn't erase intent. That afternoon, I met with the city council. The room was windowless, functional, unremarkable. I preferred it that way. We discussed waste reduction infrastructure, long-term cost efficiency employment pipelines. No one mentioned my family. No one needed to. As the meeting wrapped, one council member lingered. "Your work changed how this city thinks," she said quietly. "You should know that." I nodded. I already do." That night, I walked Verdon Hall again after closing. The space had always spoken to me, most clearly when empty. No expectations, no performance, just structure and intention. I stood near the center table and imagined it reset for a wedding. White linens, candlelight, carefully staged joy. Then I imagined something else. An empty room. I made the call the next morning. The planner answered on the second ring. "Verdon Hall," she said brightly. "This is Maribel Rowan," I replied, "regarding the Rowan Crossfield event." A pause. Papers shuffled. "Yes," she said cautiously. "The venue won't be available," I said calmly. Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm sorry," she said. "May I ask?" "No," I replied gently. "You may not." The call ended. The reaction came swiftly. Helena arrived at Pure Cycle Central again. This time unannounced and uncomposed. Her lipstick was perfect. Her hands were not. "You can't do this," she said the moment she saw me. I didn't invite her to sit. "I can," I replied. "This is cruel," she insisted. "People are watching." "Yes," I said. "They are." "You're punishing Celeste," she said. "No," I corrected. "I'm choosing myself." She scoffed. "After everything we gave you?" I met her gaze. "You gave me survival. I built everything else." Her voice rose. "You're tearing the family apart." I tilted my head, slightly. It was already in pieces. I just stopped holding it together. She stared at me, searching for softness. When she didn't find it, her shoulders slumped. "You've changed," she said again. "I stopped asking," I replied. She left without another word. The fallout rippled outward. Quietly, relentlessly. Celeste stopped posting altogether. Julian's firm shifted direction again, distancing itself from anything remotely tied to sustainability. Invitations stopped coming. Not to me, to them. I heard about it secondhand. From acquaintances. From articles. From silence. One evening, Noah came by again. This time he didn't hover. "I should have said something years ago," he admitted. "I didn't want to rock the boat." I nodded. "I know." He swallowed. "You're not wrong for stepping out of it." We sat together in the quiet for a while. No fixes. No declarations. Just acknowledgement. At the end of the week, Pure Cycle Collective signed its largest partnership yet. A national rollout. Hundreds of jobs. Systems that would outlast me. Vivian raised a glass at the end of the meeting. To women who don't wait for permission. I didn't toast. I didn't need to. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the folded note Rena had given me days earlier. I read it again. "We saw you before they did." I thought about the years I'd spent trying to earn that sentence from people who refused to see. The next morning, the final message arrived. From Celeste. No greeting. No anger. Just one line. "I didn't think you'd actually walk away." I stared at it. Then I typed back. I didn't walk away. I walked forward. I put the phone down. Outside, the city moved. People cleaned streets. Prepared food. Fixed systems no one noticed until they failed. I slipped on my blazer and headed to work. Somewhere behind me, doors closed quietly. Ahead of me, space opened. And this time, I didn't hesitate to step into it. I didn't feel lighter after sending that message to Celeste. I felt steadier. There's a difference people don't talk about enough. Lightness comes and goes. Stability stays. It holds even when nothing around you softens. The days that followed unfolded without drama, and that was how I knew something fundamental had changed. There were no frantic calls, no public apologies, no emotional ambushes. Just a recalibration. Slow and unmistakable. At Pure Cycle Central, the calendar filled faster than it ever had. Municipal teams wanted consultations. Universities requested curriculum partnerships. A manufacturing consortium asked to license our systems. None of them mentioned the dinner. None of them needed to. The story had already detached itself from the family it started in. I noticed how differently people spoke to me now. Not warmer. Not louder. Clearer. They didn't over-explain. They didn't soften their words. They assumed competence without asking for proof. That kind of respect doesn't announce itself. It just arrives and stays. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprints for the next regional hub, Rena stepped into my office without knocking. She held a tablet against her chest, eyes bright but focused. "We finished the pilot numbers," she said. "The schools are down 42% on waste costs." I smiled. "That's sustainable." She hesitated, then added, "The staff, they're proud." Not in a loud way, in a settled way. That mattered more than any headline. Later that day, Vivian called. Her tone was casual, but I could hear the undercurrent of satisfaction. "The International Council approved the funding," she said. "Unanimous." I leaned back in my chair. "Good. They want you in Geneva next quarter." "I'll go," I said, already thinking about who would cover which departments while I was gone. After the call, I sat quietly for a moment, hands folded on the desk. This was the version of success I had always wanted. Not spectacle, not vindication, continuity. That evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed again. Helena. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded different this time. Lower. Less controlled. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said. "And maybe that's my fault. But you've made your point. Please call me." I deleted the message. Recognition isn't something you demand after years of denial. It's something you earn through presence, not proximity. The following week, the wedding was officially postponed. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet update through mutual acquaintances. Julian's firm had reportedly advised simplifying commitments. Celeste withdrew from public view entirely. People stopped asking me how I felt about it. That told me everything. One morning, while walking through Verdant Lab before service, I found Caleb standing near the prep line, staring at the floor plan taped to the wall. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Just thinking." "About?" He smiled faintly. "About how this place feels different now." "It is different," I said. "No," he corrected gently. "It's the same, but people see it." I let that settle. That afternoon, a courier arrived with a large package addressed to me personally. Inside was a framed newspaper clipping, a feature story on women reshaping urban systems. My photo wasn't included, just a quote. "Some structures are strongest where no one thinks to look." The sender hadn't signed their name. I placed the frame on the shelf behind my desk. Days passed, then weeks. The silence from my family became complete. No texts, no messages, no indirect attempts through friends or colleagues. Even Noah stopped checking in. I didn't blame him. Silence can be its own form of processing. One night, as I was locking up Verdant Hall after a private event, I found an envelope slipped beneath the office door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "I used to think strength looked like control. I was wrong. I'm sorry." No name. I folded the paper carefully and set it aside. Apologies don't need witnesses to be real. They also don't need responses to exist. The next morning, I received confirmation that Pure Cycle Collective would be the lead partner for a multi-city initiative. It meant long hours, difficult negotiations, scrutiny. It also meant permanence. At the signing meeting, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Calm, focused, not triumphant, not hardened, present. That evening, I walked through the greenhouse alone. The plants were thriving, leaves full and green, systems humming softly. I stopped near the center row and closed my eyes, letting the warmth settle into my bones. This was the part no one warned me about. The quiet after choosing yourself. The absence of noise where conflict once lived. It wasn't lonely. It was clean. A few days later, Noah called. I answered. "I ran into Mom," he said. "She's different." I didn't respond. "She asked about you," he added. Didn't ask me to pass anything along. Just asked. "That's new," I said. He hesitated. "Do you think you'll ever talk to her again?" I considered the question carefully. Maybe. When the conversation isn't about what I took from her. He exhaled. "Fair." We ended the call without promises. As summer edged closer, invitations arrived. Conferences, panels, advisory boards. I accepted some, declined others. My calendar reflected intention now, not obligation. One afternoon, while preparing to leave for a site visit, Rena stopped me at the door. She handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it later," she said. "It's from the team." I waited until I got home. Inside was a simple metal plaque, etched with clean lettering, built with hands, led with vision. I set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. That night I slept deeply. Months passed. The dinner felt distant now, like something that happened in another life. Occasionally, someone would reference it in passing, but without curiosity. The story had moved on. So had I. Then, one evening, as I was leaving Verdant Hall, I saw Helena standing across the street. She didn't approach. She didn't call out. She just stood there, hands clasped in front of her, watching the light spill from the windows. For a moment, I considered crossing the street. I didn't. Some distances aren't meant to be closed quickly, or at all. I turned, unlocked my car, and drove away. In the weeks that followed, Pure Cycle Collective finalized its largest expansion yet. Systems rolled out. Jobs created. Communities stabilized. One morning, as I reviewed the final documents, Vivian looked at me across the table. "You know," she said, "this is the part people usually mess up." "Which part?" "The part where they confuse being right with being loud." I smiled. "I'm not interested in being either." She nodded. "That's why this will last." That evening, I stood alone in Verdon Hall once more. Lights dimmed, chairs stacked, the room breathing quietly around me. I walked to the center table and placed my hand flat against the wood. I didn't think about my family. I thought about the women who would sit here someday, telling their own stories, about the systems still waiting to be built, about the work that mattered whether anyone clapped or not. I whispered to the empty room, "We're just getting started." And for the first time in my life, I believed it without needing anyone else to agree. Silence has weight when it lasts long enough. It stops feeling like absence and starts behaving like presence. By the time autumn settled over Ravencroft City, the quiet between my family and me had taken on a shape I could almost touch. It followed me into meetings, lingered in empty corridors, hovered just beyond the glass walls of my office. Not haunting, observing. I didn't flinch from it. At Pure Cycle Central, the rhythm of work had deepened. Expansion no longer felt like a leap forward, but like a natural continuation of something already in motion. New regional leads were trained. Systems replicated cleanly. I spent more time listening than directing, letting the structure do what it was designed to do. One morning, as I reviewed staffing projections, Rena stepped into my office and closed the door behind her. "We need to talk," she said, not urgently but with intent. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Go on." She sat, hands folded. "People are starting to ask questions again." "About what?" I asked. "About you," she said. "Not your work. You." I waited. "They're curious why you don't talk about your family. Why you don't leverage the story. They think you're leaving something on the table." I smiled faintly. "I already took what mattered." She nodded. "I know. I just wanted you to hear it before someone else says it louder." That afternoon, the invitation arrived. A formal letter. Thick paper. Heavy seal. The Rowan Foundation Annual Gala. I hadn't heard that name in months. The foundation had always been Helena's domain. Charitable dinners, donor lists, social visibility. The same institution that once quietly redirected funds away from sanitation initiatives because they weren't appealing enough. I read the invitation twice, then once more. Honorary recognition for contributions to urban sustainability. My name sat neatly beneath the heading. No apology attached. No explanation. Just an assumption that time had softened the edges. I placed the letter in my drawer and didn't respond. 2 days later, Noah showed up again. He didn't knock this time. He waited until I noticed him standing near the office doorway, hands clasped, posture uncertain. "They're planning something," he said quietly. I didn't look up from my screen. "They always are." He exhaled. "Mom thinks this will fix it." I finally met his eyes. "Fix what?" He hesitated. The way it ended. I closed my laptop. It didn't end. It changed. Noah nodded slowly. "She wants you there." "I know." "You're not going." "No." He didn't argue. That alone told me how far things had shifted. That evening, I attended a small dinner hosted by Vivian. No press. No speeches. Just 6 people around a table, all of whom understood the difference between power and noise. Halfway through dessert, one of the guests leaned toward me. "They're circling," she said casually. "Your family." "I'm aware," I replied. "They think if they restore the image, they restore access." I took a sip of water. "They're mistaken." Vivian smiled. I told them that. The gala happened without me. I saw the photos later. Helena in pale silver, Gerard smiling stiffly, Celeste absent. The banner behind the stage still bore my name. though someone had adjusted the font size down slightly, as if that might alter reality. I felt nothing. A week later, a journalist reached out, asking for comment on the family reconciliation narrative. I declined. The narrative collapsed on its own. Then came the call I hadn't expected, from the Foundation's legal counsel. Polite, measured, careful. There appears to be a discrepancy, he said, regarding intellectual property contributions tied to early sustainability grants. I leaned back in my chair. Go on. Several programs credited to the Foundation were, in fact, developed under Pure Cycle Collective. Yes, I said calmly. They were. A pause. We'd like to resolve this quietly. I already did, I replied. The call ended shortly after. The following morning, Helena called. I answered. Her voice sounded older. Not tired. Smaller. They're auditing us, she said. The board is nervous. I'm not involved, I replied. You could stop it. I didn't start it. Silence stretched between us. I never meant to erase you, she said finally. I closed my eyes. Intent doesn't undo impact. Another pause. You've changed the balance, she said. No, I corrected. I stepped out of it. She didn't respond. In the weeks that followed, the Foundation quietly restructured. Programs were reassigned. Credits amended. Donations redirected. Nothing public. Nothing dramatic. But the phone stopped ringing on Helena's end. Celeste resurfaced briefly online, posting a photo of an empty table with a caption. Some chapters close quietly. I didn't react. The final shift came unexpectedly. One afternoon, as I was preparing to leave for Geneva, a courier arrived with a single envelope marked urgent. Inside was a notarized document. Gerard had resigned from the Foundation board. No explanation attached. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. That night, as the city lights stretched beneath the plane window, I thought about how power rarely leaves loudly. It withdraws when it realizes it's no longer obeyed. Geneva was efficient, focused, unemotional, exactly my kind of room. I spoke about systems, about durability, about how work built quietly lasts longer than work built for applause. Afterward, a young woman approached me. My family never sees what I do, she said, but they love the results. I smiled. That's enough. When I returned home, autumn had deepened. Leaves gathered along sidewalks. The air carried a different weight. Verdon Hall prepared for its busiest season yet. One evening, while reviewing reservations, Caleb paused beside me. There's a booking request you should see, he said. I glanced at the screen. A private event. Anonymous client. Entire venue. Date. 6 months out. I nodded. Approve it. He hesitated. The contact email. I looked closer. Helena Rowan. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I closed the screen. Some requests aren't refusals. They're tests. And this one wasn't finished yet. I didn't answer the booking request right away. Not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I understood exactly what it was testing. Helena hadn't reached out directly. She hadn't called. She hadn't apologized. She had gone through the system, the same way she'd always operated, by maneuvering around the person instead of meeting them. I let the request sit in the queue for 3 days. During those days, I went on with my work as if nothing had happened. I finalized schedules, approved vendor contracts, walked the floor at Verdon Hall during lunch service, and thanked the staff by name. The restaurant was alive in that steady way that comes when systems hum without friction. Guests lingered longer now. Conversations flowed. People felt something here, even if they couldn't articulate it. That was the difference between a space designed to impress and one designed to endure. On the 4th day, I asked Caleb to bring the request up on the screen again. Still open, he said carefully. They haven't followed up. Good, I replied. I approved it. No comment. No note. No conditions. Just approval. Caleb watched me for a moment. Do you want me to flag it? No, I said. Treat it like any other booking. He nodded, though I could tell he understood there was nothing ordinary about it. The confirmation email went out automatically. I imagined Helena reading it. The neutral language, the lack of acknowledgement, the absence of resistance she'd likely prepared herself to fight against. Silence can feel like permission if you're used to control. That's what she would mistake this for. The weeks leading up to the event passed quietly. Too quietly. I left for Geneva and returned without incident. The International Council meetings were efficient, grounded, free of posturing. I spoke about resilience, about infrastructure that didn't depend on individual approval. People listened, not because I demanded attention, but because the systems spoke for themselves. When I came back to Ravencroft City, autumn had fully settled in. Verdant Hall glowed warmer now, the wood tones deeper, the lighting softer. Reservations were booked solid through the season. Helena never contacted me directly. Instead, small ripples appeared. A florist called to confirm specifications I hadn't approved. A catering consultant requested a menu alteration that contradicted our sourcing standards. A stylist asked whether the family table should be repositioned for maximum visibility. Each time, my team redirected them back to the standard process. No exceptions. One afternoon, Rena stepped into my office holding a printed email. They're trying to run the event like it's theirs, she said quietly. They always do, I replied. Do you want us to stop them? No, I said. I want us to do exactly what we do for everyone. She smiled faintly. That might be worse for them. It will be clearer, I corrected. The night of the event arrived crisp and cloudless. Verdant Hall filled with guests dressed in muted elegance. No press, no photographers, just donors, board members, and acquaintances who believed they were attending something restorative. I didn't enter through the front. I watched from the mezzanine as the room filled, as Helena moved among the guests with practiced ease, greeting, smiling, touching arms lightly. Gerard stood near the bar, quieter than I remembered. He didn't command the space anymore. He occupied it. Celeste arrived late. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room as if unsure where she belonged. Her confidence, once effortless, now looked rehearsed. Julian wasn't with her. I stayed above them until the program began. When I descended the stairs, the room shifted. Conversations softened. A few heads turned. Not with surprise, with recognition. Helena saw me immediately. Her smile faltered for half a second before she recovered. She crossed the room, posture perfect. You came, she said. I own the building, I replied calmly. Her lips tightened. This was supposed to be neutral. It is, I said. I'm not on the guest list. She studied my face, searching for provocation. Finding none unsettled her more than confrontation ever could. The evening unfolded with polite speeches and restrained applause. Helena spoke about community impact, about legacy, about the importance of unity. My name was never mentioned. It didn't need to be. As dinner was served, I took a seat near the edge of the room. Not hidden, not central, exactly where I wanted to be. Halfway through the main course, a board member stood. There's one more acknowledgement this evening, he said. An overdue one. Helena stiffened. The man gestured toward me. Verdant Hall exists because of Maribel Rowan. So do the programs we've been discussing tonight. It's time that said aloud. The room went still. Helena's face drained of color. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I simply met the board member's gaze and inclined my head once. Applause followed. Not loud. Not theatrical. Steady. Helena sat frozen. Gerard looked at his hands. Celeste stared at me like she was seeing someone she'd mistaken for a stranger all her life. When the applause faded, the board member continued. Moving forward, the foundation will be aligning its initiatives directly with Pure Cycle Collective. There it was. Not an announcement. A transfer. Helena stood abruptly. This wasn't discussed. The board member's tone remained calm. It was reviewed thoroughly. I rose then, not for the room, for myself. I didn't ask for this, I said evenly. I didn't arrange it. I'm not here to reclaim anything. I looked at Helena. I built something separate because I had to. What you do with what remains is yours. No one spoke. I turned and walked toward the exit. Helena called my name. I stopped, just long enough to look back. This isn't punishment, I said. It's consequence. I left Verdon Hall without waiting for a response. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean. The city moved on, unaware of the quiet collapse that had just taken place inside one of its most polished rooms. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights low, glass of water untouched beside me. My phone buzzed once. A message from Helena. I see it now. I stared at the words. Then I set the phone face down. Some realizations come too late to change the past, but just in time to stop repeating it. And I was done repeating anything. I didn't sleep much the night after the gala. Not because my mind was racing, but because it was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of how long you lived with noise and mistook it for normal. I lay awake listening to the city breathe outside my window. Cars passing. Someone laughing faintly a few floors down. The hum of systems doing what they were built to do without supervision. In the morning, the message from Helena was still there. I see it now. I didn't respond. Understanding doesn't require acknowledgement to exist. And some realizations don't need to be welcomed back into your life to be complete. I went to work. Verdon Hall opened for lunch at 11. I arrived early, as I often did, walking through the empty dining room while the lights were still low. The wood floors caught the morning glow differently now, deeper, warmer. The space felt settled, like a house that had finally chosen its owner. Caleb was already there, reviewing reservations. He looked up when he saw me. Big night, he said. Yes, I replied, but not for us. He smiled, understanding immediately. That was something I'd learned to value above praise, understanding without explanation. In the kitchen, the team moved with their usual focus. No whispers, no curiosity. No one asked how I felt. They didn't need to. The work spoke for itself, and so did I. Around noon, Rena found me near the greenhouse doors. She held a tablet in one hand, the other tucked into her pocket. The foundation released a statement, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Did they? She nodded. They credited Pure Cycle Collective as the originator of their sustainability framework. Retroactively, I exhaled slowly. Good. That's it, she asked gently. That's enough, I replied. She smiled and turned back toward the prep area. I watched her go, thinking about how many people had walked beside me over the years without ever asking for a spotlight. People who showed up, who stayed, who built. That afternoon, the city council confirmed what had already been circulating quietly. The new initiative would move forward under Pure Cycle's leadership alone. No joint branding, no symbolic gestures, just structure and accountability. The transfer was complete. The phone didn't ring. No call from Helena. No follow-up from Gerard. No message from Celeste. Silence, when it stretches this long, stops feeling like a waiting period. It becomes a conclusion. That evening, I took a walk through the old harbor district. The air was cool, carrying the scent of water and stone. People passed me without recognition, and I liked that. Not anonymity, normalcy. The kind that lets you exist without explanation. I stopped at a corner cafe and sat outside with a cup of tea, watching the light fade. Somewhere across the city, my family was likely doing the same thing they always did when confronted with something they couldn't control. Adjusting the narrative privately while pretending it had never mattered. For the first time, that thought didn't stir anything in me. The following weeks unfolded quietly. Verdant Hall hosted new events. Different faces, different stories. People who walked in without knowing anything about the past, and left feeling something they couldn't name. That was the best outcome any space could offer. Pure Cycle Collective expanded into 2 new regions. Rena took the lead on one. Caleb began mentoring a new operations manager. Vivian sent a brief message from abroad. "This is stable." "That's rare." I saved it. Stability is underrated. One afternoon, as I was reviewing schedules, Noah sent a text. "Mom's moving out of the house." I read it once. Then again. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because some transitions aren't invitations. They're information. A few days later, I ran into Gerard by chance. It was at a bookstore near the river. I was flipping through a book on urban design when I felt someone hesitate beside me. He cleared his throat. "Maribel." I turned slowly. He looked older. Not in years, in posture. The confidence he once wore like armor had thinned. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I come here often," I replied. We stood in silence for a moment. Not awkward. Just unfamiliar. "I wanted to say," he began, then stopped. "Tried again. I thought providing was enough. I was wrong." I nodded once. "It usually is for the person providing." He swallowed. "You built something remarkable." "I built something necessary," I corrected gently. He looked at me then, really looked, as if memorizing the version of me he'd missed. "I hope one day." I raised my hand slightly. Not to stop him. To signal completion. "Take care of yourself," I said. He nodded. "You too." We parted without drama. Without promises. It was the cleanest exchange we'd ever had. Spring came quietly that year. The city softened. Trees bloomed along the sidewalks. Verdant Lab overflowed with green, the herbs thriving under the glass roof. I spent more time there now, walking the rows in the early mornings, fingers brushing leaves, grounding myself before the day unfolded. One morning, a young woman waited near the entrance. She looked nervous, clutching a notebook to her chest. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For proving that work like ours counts," she said, "even when no one's clapping." I smiled, especially then. She left lighter than she arrived. That afternoon, I finally deleted the old family group chat from my phone. Not out of spite, out of clarity. The past didn't need a digital anchor anymore. The last message in the thread was from years ago. Helena reminding us to dress appropriately for a fundraiser. I stared at it briefly, then let it go. Some scripts don't deserve an encore. On the anniversary of Verdant Hall's opening, the team surprised me with a small gathering after closing. No speeches, no banners, just food, laughter, and quiet gratitude. Rena handed me a folded napkin. Inside were 5 words written neatly. We knew before they did. I folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket. Later that night, alone in the dining room, I sat at the center table one last time. Not to reclaim it, to release it. I thought about the version of myself who once sat here, shrinking under familiar voices. Who believed being unseen meant being insignificant. Who waited for acknowledgement from people who confused control with care. That version of me no longer lived here. I stood, turned off the last light, and locked the door behind me. At home, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window, city lights stretching endlessly ahead. My phone buzzed once. An unknown number. "I'm proud of you." No name. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Pride given too late doesn't change the work already done. What mattered was this. I had stopped asking for permission. I had stopped translating myself for people who refused to listen. I had stopped mistaking silence for failure. Some people never see what you build until they're standing inside it. And even then, some will still look past the walls and wonder why it doesn't belong to them. That's not your burden to carry. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. You don't owe anyone a seat at your table if they never asked what it took to build it. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. And you don't need applause to know your work matters. You just need to keep building. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, minimized, or pushed to the edge of your own life, I'd love to hear from you. Share where you're watching from or what part of this journey felt familiar. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Someone out there needs to hear what you just did.